That, of course, is the Rolling Stones, who after 6 decades of rock and roll, Mick Jagger, Keith Richards, and Ronnie Wood, they are at it again.
In 1969, the Rolling Stones decided to host a free concert at the Altamont Speedway in California. They wanted it to be a celebration of music and peace, much like the famous Woodstock Festival that had taken place earlier that year. They even decided to hire the Hells Angels as security for the event, paying them with $500 worth of free beer. However, things took a dark turn, and the event is now remembered for the chaos and tragedy that unfolded. The idea for the Altamont Free Concert came from the desire to create a West Coast version of Woodstock. Woodstock had been a peaceful and joyous event, and the Rolling Stones wanted to replicate that atmosphere. The concert was hastily organized, with the location being changed just days before the event. Initially, it was supposed to be held at San Francisco's Golden Gate Park, but logistical issues forced a last-minute move to the Altamont Speedway. The Rolling Stones and the concert organizers, including the Grateful Dead, faced numerous challenges in planning the event. They had little time to prepare, and the Speedway lacked the necessary infrastructure to handle the massive crowd that was expected. Despite these obstacles, they pushed forward with the hope that the spirit of the 1960s counterculture would carry the day. Hundreds of thousands of fans poured into the Altamont Speedway for the free concert. The lineup was impressive, featuring some of the biggest names in rock music at the time. Santana, Jefferson Airplane, the Flying Burrito Brothers, and Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young were set to perform before the Rolling Stones took the stage. The atmosphere was electric with excitement and anticipation. As the concert began, it quickly became clear that things were not going as smoothly as hoped. The stage was set up at the bottom of a slope, making it difficult for people at the back to see, and the crowd started to surge forward. The lack of proper facilities and organization led to a sense of unease among the attendees. Despite the challenges, the early performances went on with high energy. Santana's set was powerful, and the crowd was still in good spirits. However, as more people arrived, the area around the stage became increasingly crowded and chaotic. Jefferson Airplane took the stage next, and their performance was marked by growing tension in the audience. Lead singer Marty Balin was even knocked out by a Hells Angel during an altercation. David Crosby of Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young later reflected on the chaos, noting that there was a bad vibe from the beginning. The musicians on stage could sense the crowd's restlessness and the mounting pressure. Even as the day wore on and the music continued, the atmosphere grew more ominous. By the time the Rolling Stones were ready to perform, the sun had set and darkness fell over the Speedway. The band hoped their music would calm the crowd, but the situation was already spiraling out of control. As night fell, the Rolling Stones took the stage and the tension in the crowd reached a boiling point. The band started their set with high hopes, but the atmosphere was far from what they had envisioned. Mick Jagger, the lead singer, tried to engage the crowd, but it was clear that something was very wrong. The Hells Angels, who had been hired to provide security, were struggling to maintain order. They were positioned at the front of the stage, and their methods of crowd control were aggressive and often violent. Fans who got too close to the stage were met with hostility. As the night wore on, the Angels became increasingly agitated and hostile. During Sympathy for the Devil, a scuffle broke out near the stage, causing the band to stop playing. Jagger tried to calm the crowd, urging everyone to just be cool down in the front there, don't push around. Despite his efforts, the violence continued to escalate. The turning point came during the performance of Under My Thumb. Meredith Hunter, an 18-year-old African-American fan, attempted to get closer to the stage. He was confronted by members of the Hells Angels, and a violent altercation ensued. Hunter pulled out a revolver, and in response, he was fatally stabbed by Hells Angel Alan Pissarro. The tragic event was captured on film by the documentary crew Making Gimme Shelter, providing a haunting record of the chaos. The concert continued after the incident, but the mood was irreparably damaged. The Rolling Stones were unaware of the gravity of what had happened until much later. They finished their set, but the magic of the music had been overshadowed by the violence and tragedy. After Meredith Hunter's death, the atmosphere at the Altamont Free Concert became even more tense and chaotic. The Rolling Stones, unaware of the full extent of the tragedy, continued their performance in an attempt to prevent further unrest. However, the crowd's energy had shifted and the sense of unease was palpable. As the Rolling Stones finished their set and left the stage, the reality of what had happened began to sink in. Backstage, there was confusion and concern among the band members and the crew. The sense of a disastrous ending to what was supposed to be a historic concert was heavy in the air. Mick Jagger, visibly shaken, was rushed away from the speedway for his safety. Meanwhile, concertgoers were struggling to leave the venue. The lack of proper lighting and clear exits made it difficult for people to navigate their way out, adding to the chaos. Emergency services were overwhelmed, and the response to injured and distressed fans was slow. The documentary crew that had been filming the event for Gimme Shelter captured not only the performances, but also the turmoil that ensued. This footage would later provide crucial evidence and insight into the night's events. According to Rolling Stone magazine, the film became a stark reminder of the dark turn the 1960s counterculture had taken. As the night wore on, the tragic news of Hunter's death spread among those remaining at the speedway. People were shocked and saddened, realizing that the ideals of peace and love promoted by the counterculture movement had been marred by violence. The Hells Angels too were confronted with the reality of their actions, facing both legal and public backlash. The day after the Altamont Free Concert, the aftermath of the tragedy was widely felt and deeply troubling. News outlets quickly picked up the story, with headlines focusing on the violence, the involvement of the Hells Angels, and the death of Meredith Hunter. The media coverage cast a shadow over what was intended to be a grand finale to the 1960s counterculture movement. The Rolling Stones woke up to a storm of bad press and public outrage. They were criticized for their decision to hire the Hells Angels and for their handling of the event. Mick Jagger and the rest of the band members were in a state of shock and disbelief. They issued statements expressing their sorrow and condolences to Hunter's family, but the damage to their reputation was significant. In San Francisco, where the band was staying, the atmosphere was somber. The organizers and musicians involved were deeply affected by the events. Members of the Grateful Dead, who had also played a role in organizing the concert but ultimately decided not to perform, were particularly dismayed by how the day had unfolded. Jerry Garcia later reflected on the event, describing it as one of the darkest days in our history. Law enforcement and legal authorities began their investigations. Alan Passaro, the Hells Angel who had stabbed Meredith Hunter, was arrested and later tried for murder. In court, the footage from the documentary Gimme Shelter was used as evidence. Passaro claimed he acted in self-defense as Hunter had pulled out a gun during the altercation. He was acquitted of the murder charges, but the trial further highlighted the chaos and poor decision-making that characterized the event. The public and media backlash forced a re-evaluation of concert security and organization. Rolling Stone magazine and other publications ran detailed articles examining the failures of Altamont and calling for stricter regulations and better planning for future concerts. The music industry took note, leading to significant changes in how large-scale events were managed. For the fans who had attended Altamont, the experience left a lasting impact. Many were disillusioned, feeling that the ideals of peace and love had been betrayed by the violence they witnessed. The event marked a turning point, symbolizing the end of the utopian dreams that had defined much of the 1960s counterculture. The Rolling Stones, while deeply affected by the tragedy, continued with their career. They learned from the mistakes of Altamont, ensuring that future concerts were better organized and safer for their fans. The Altamont Free Concert remains a poignant reminder of how quickly things can go wrong, and the importance of careful planning and consideration in bringing people together for music and celebration.